The small town of Pine Creek hadn't seen much excitement in years. Most afternoons, the community center stood quiet except for the occasional meeting or craft class. But today, soft piano music floated through its worn wooden doors as 10-year-old Lily Chen practiced after school. Lily's fingers moved carefully across the keys of the old grand piano. It wasn't perfect. Some keys stuck and others sounded slightly out of tune. But to Lily, it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. At home, she only had a small electronic keyboard her parents had found at a yard sale. This piano, with its rich sound and real weighted keys, felt like magic under her fingertips. The community center let her practice here twice a week, thanks to Mrs. Wilson, the elderly piano teacher who'd noticed Lily watching through the window during lessons. Mrs. Wilson wasn't particularly warm or encouraging, but she'd convinced the center's board to allow this quiet Chinese-American girl to use the piano when no classes were scheduled. "You have 30 minutes," Mrs. Wilson had reminded her today, checking her watch before heading to the office to grade theory papers. "No more." Lily nodded, already lost in the music. She was working on a Chopin piece that she'd heard online, and taught herself by ear, her small hands stretching to reach the challenging chords. She didn't have proper sheet music. Her family couldn't afford regular lessons. But she'd watched countless videos, mimicking the hand positions and memorizing every note. The Chen family had moved to Pine Creek 3 years ago. Her parents ran the town's only Asian grocery store, working long hours to make ends meet. They'd left behind family, friends, and promising careers in China to give Lily and her younger brother better opportunities in America. Though they encouraged her interest in music, professional lessons weren't in the budget. Still, Lily practiced religiously on her little keyboard, playing after homework and before bed. As she reached the most difficult part of the piece, Lily closed her eyes, feeling the music more than thinking about it. The afternoon sunlight streamed through dusty windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn hardwood floor. For a moment, she wasn't in a small-town community center but on a grand stage, playing for an audience who understood just how special this music was. The piece built toward its emotional peak, and Lily leaned into the piano, her body swaying slightly as her fingers moved faster. The old piano seemed to come alive under her touch, its voice growing stronger and more confident with each measure. Then it happened. As Lily reached to turn an imaginary page of music, a habit she'd picked up from watching real pianists, her elbow bumped the piano's heavy wooden lid. It had been propped open with an old wooden rod, the kind pianos had used for generations before modern hydraulic systems. The rod, likely already unstable, slipped from its groove. Time seemed to slow down. Lily turned, eyes widening in horror, as the massive lid began to fall. She yanked her hands away from the keys just in time, but couldn't stop what came next. The lid crashed down with a sound that wasn't just loud, it was catastrophic. A sickening crack echoed through the room, followed by a discordant jumble of notes as something inside the piano broke. The sound hung in the air for what felt like forever before fading into the most terrible silence Lily had ever heard. She sat frozen on the bench, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. What had just happened? What had she done? What on earth was that? Mrs. Wilson's voice called from down the hall, followed by hurried footsteps. Panic gripped Lily's chest. She stood up, almost knocking over the bench, unsure whether to run or stay. Before she could decide, Mrs. Wilson burst through the door, her face flushed and reading glasses dangling from a chain around her neck. "What happened? What did you—" Mrs. Wilson's question died on her lips as she saw the piano lid closed and heard the strange, resonating hum still coming from inside the instrument. "Oh my goodness, what did you do?" I didn't, it fell," Lily stammered, her English failing, her in her panic. "The stick, it slipped. I didn't touch—" Mrs. Wilson rushed to the piano, carefully lifting the lid to assess the damage. The prop stick had indeed fallen, but that wasn't the worst of it. When the heavy lid crashed down, it had damaged one of the hinges. Worse still, something inside made a terrible sound when Mrs. Wilson pressed a key near the middle of the keyboard. "The soundboard," Mrs. Wilson whispered, her face pale. I think it's cracked. Lily didn't know what a soundboard was, but from Mrs. Wilson's expression, she knew it was serious. Can it be fixed? She asked in a small voice. Mrs. Wilson turned to her, eyes narrowing. This piano is over 80 years old, young lady. It was donated to the center by the Henderson family. Do you have any idea how much it would cost to repair something like this? Tears filled Lily's eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I allowed you to use this piano as a favor, Mrs. Wilson continued, her voice rising. The board was already hesitant about letting children practice unsupervised. Now look what's happened. The door opened again and Mr. Parker, the center's director, walked in. I heard a crash. Is everything okay in here? Mrs. Wilson gestured dramatically at the piano. This child has damaged the Henderson piano. The lid fell and cracked the soundboard. Mr. Parker's friendly face turned serious as he came over to inspect the damage. He pressed a few keys, wincing at the strange vibration that followed. That doesn't sound good at all. It was an accident, Lily said, her voice barely audible as tears rolled down her cheeks. The stick that holds the lid, it slipped. I didn't touch it, I promise. Mr. Parker looked at her, then at the piano. He ran his hand along the broken hinge and frowned. These old prop sticks can be tricky if they're not set properly. Regardless, Mrs. Wilson interrupted. The piano is damaged and it will cost thousands to repair if it can be repaired at all. The community center can't afford that kind of expense. Lily felt sick to her stomach. Thousands of dollars? Her family's entire savings wouldn't cover that. And it had been an accident, she hadn't done anything wrong. But looking at Mrs. Wilson's angry face and Mr. Parker's worried one, she knew they didn't believe her. I should call your parents, Mr. Parker said, his tone gentler than Mrs. Wilson's, but still serious. My mom and dad are working at the store, Lily said, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. They can't leave until closing time. Then I'll drive you home and speak with them there, Mr. Parker decided. Mrs. Wilson, can you lock up here? Mrs. Wilson nodded stiffly, still glaring at Lily. The board will need to be informed immediately, and we'll need to get a piano technician to assess the full extent of the damage. The ride to Chen's Market was the longest 10 minutes of Lily's life. She sat in Mr. Parker's car, staring out the window as familiar buildings passed by. How would she explain this to her parents? They worked so hard, and now they might have to pay for an expensive repair because of her. Word spread quickly in Pine Creek. By evening, it seemed everyone knew about the damaged piano. The next morning at school, Lily could feel the stares and whispers following her through the hallways. Her teacher, Ms. Bryant, overheard some kids talking and pulled Lily aside at recess. I heard about what happened at the community center, she said kindly. Accidents happen, Lily. Don't let it get you down too much. But it was hard not to when so many people seemed angry about it. Someone's parent had started a fundraiser to repair the piano that the Chen girl broke, which made it sound like she'd done it on purpose. Her few friends at school didn't know what to say, so they mostly said nothing at all. At home, her parents weren't angry, just worried. They'd already visited the community center and spoken with the board members, promising to help however they could. Her father had even offered to work on weekends doing maintenance at the center to help pay for the repairs. It's not fair, Lily's brother said at dinner that night. It was just an accident. Life isn't always fair, her mother replied softly. But we face problems together, as a family. That night, unable to sleep, Lily sat at her little keyboard with headphones on so she wouldn't wake anyone. Her fingers moved over the plastic keys, but it wasn't the same. She missed the real piano already, its touch and sound that made the music come alive. What if she never got to play a real piano again? What if everyone in town always remembered her as the girl who broke the Henderson piano? She closed her eyes and continued playing in the dark, the music in her head much richer than the sounds, coming from her keyboard. Somehow she had to find a way to make this right. She just didn't know how. 2 days after the incident, Lily stayed home from school. Her mother had found her crying at breakfast, unable to face another day of whispers and stares. The community's reaction had been swift and harsh. Someone had even put a handwritten sign on the grocery store door that read, Piano Breaker's Family Shop. Her father had torn it down before opening, his face tight with anger and hurt. "Maybe. One day at home will help," her mother had said, stroking Lily's hair. "You can help me with inventory in the stockroom." But even surrounded by boxes of rice noodles and canned lychees, Lily couldn't escape her thoughts. Her fingers tapped unconsciously against cardboard boxes, playing invisible melodies as she counted and sorted. Music had always been her escape, her private joy. Now it felt tainted by shame. Meanwhile, at the community center, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a worn leather case stood examining the damaged piano. Thomas Reed had been tuning and repairing pianos for over 30 years, traveling between small towns across 3 states. The community center board had called him in to assess the damage and provide a repair estimate. "It's worse than I thought," Mr. Parker said, hovering nearby as Thomas opened the piano's lid carefully. "The sound it makes is terrible." Thomas didn't respond immediately. His large, calloused hands moved methodically over the instrument, checking the broken hinge first, then examining the inner workings with the precision of a surgeon. He pressed keys, listened to their vibrations, and occasionally made small notes in a worn notebook. "This hinge has been corroded for years," he finally said, pointing to the damaged metal. "See this greenish color? That's verdigris. It happens, with age and humidity. This was going to fail eventually, no matter who was playing." Mrs. Wilson, who had been watching from across the room, approached with her arms crossed. "But it was fine until that Chen girl was banging on it." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Banging on it? Was she playing with her fists?" "Well, no," Mrs. Wilson admitted. "But she was playing music far too advanced for her level. Chopin, I believe. She has no formal training, just watches videos online." This caught Thomas's attention. "She was playing Chopin? How old is this child?" 10, Mr. Parker answered. "Lily Chen. Her family runs the Asian market on Maple Street." Thomas nodded slowly, then turned back to the piano. As he examined the soundboard, he noticed some sheet music partially tucked under the bench. Pulling it out, he found it wasn't sheet music at all, but blank staff paper filled with handwritten notes. A child's careful attempt to transcribe music by ear. The notation was unusual, not quite standard, with small Chinese characters in some margins and curious symbols that seemed to indicate emotional expressions rather than technical directions. Between the lines, small fingers had drawn waves and shapes that somehow corresponded to the music's flow. "Is this hers?" Thomas asked, holding up the papers. Mrs. Wilson glanced over. "Yes. I've told her repeatedly that's not how you write music, properly, but she insists on doing things her own way." Thomas studied the pages more carefully. Though unconventional, the notation showed an intuitive understanding of musical structure that most adults never developed. He had seen professional composers with less instinctive grasp of how music worked. "How often does she practice here?" he asked. "Twice a week for 30 minutes, Mrs. Wilson replied. "Though that's over now, obviously." Thomas carefully folded the notation papers and slipped them into his pocket. "I need to hear her play." "What?" Mrs. Wilson looked bewildered. "Whatever for. The issue is repairing the piano." "I'll get to that," Thomas said. "But first, I'd like to meet this child who plays Chopin without formal training and invents her own notation system." Mr. Parker seemed relieved by Thomas's interest. "The Chen family lives above their store. I can take you there after you finish your assessment." Thomas completed his examination, confirming that while the damage was significant, it was repairable. The hinge would need replacement, and the soundboard had a hairline crack that affected some of the middle register's resonance. It would be expensive, but not impossible. That evening, after the grocery store had closed, a knock on the apartment door startled the Chen family during dinner. Lily's father answered, surprised to find Mr. Parker and a stranger with a kind, weathered face standing in the hallway. "Mr. Chen, this is Thomas Reed," Mr. Parker explained. "He's the piano technician who examined the community center piano today. He'd like to speak with Lily, if that's all right." Lily shrank in her chair, certain this man had come to tell them how much money they owed for the repairs. Her mother squeezed her shoulder reassuringly before inviting the visitors inside. Their apartment was small but meticulously kept. Lily's keyboard sat in the corner of the living room, atop a folding table covered with a cloth embroidered with Lotus flowers, a gift from her grandmother before they left China. Thomas's eyes went straight to the keyboard. Is this where you practice, Lily? She nodded silently, studying her hands in her lap. The piano at the community center wasn't damaged because of anything you did, Thomas said directly. The hinge was already failing. It would have broken whether you were playing or someone else was. The relief in the room was palpable. Lily's father exhaled audibly and her mother's eyes glistened with tears. You're sure? Her father asked. Thomas nodded. Absolutely certain. I've been fixing pianos for longer than Lily's been alive. That hinge had years of corrosion. It was an accident waiting to happen. Lily felt as if a heavy weight had lifted from her chest. It wasn't her fault after all. But that's not why I wanted to meet Lily, Thomas continued, pulling the notation papers from his pocket. I found these at the center. Are they yours? Lily nodded, embarrassed. I was trying to write down the music so I could remember it better. You created your own notation system? I just draw what the music feels like, she explained hesitantly. The regular notes don't show everything about how it should sound. Thomas smiled. You're absolutely right about that. He turned to her parents. Would it be all right if Lily played something for me? On her keyboard? Her parents exchanged glances, then nodded encouragingly to Lily. Shyly, she moved to her keyboard and turned it on, adjusting the volume to a modest level. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment as she decided what to play. She began with the Chopin piece she'd been practicing at the community center, the one that had been interrupted by the accident. Even on the limited keyboard with its plastic keys and electronic sound, her playing had a depth that made Thomas lean forward in his seat. Her small hands moved with remarkable precision, but it was the musicality, the subtle ebbs and flows of tempo, the intuitive understanding of emotional phrasing that made his eyebrows rise. When she finished, the room was silent. Even Mr. Parker, who had little knowledge of classical music, seemed moved. That was beautiful, Lily, Thomas said quietly. Have you ever had formal lessons? She shook her head. We can't afford them. I watch videos online and try to copy what I see and hear. And do you write your own music too? He asked, gesturing to the notation papers. Sometimes, she admitted. Just simple things. Would you play one of your compositions for me? Lily hesitated, then nodded. She closed her eyes for a moment. Gathering her thoughts, then began to play something entirely different from the Chopin piece. It started simply, like a traditional Chinese melody her grandmother used to hum, but then evolved into something more complex, weaving in elements that reminded Thomas of Bach's counterpoint, but with a distinctly contemporary feel. As she played, Thomas took out his phone and, after a questioning glance at her parents, who nodded permission, began recording. The piece lasted just under 3 minutes, but in that time, it told a story as clearly as any words could, of longing, of journey, of finding beauty in unfamiliar places. When the final notes faded, Thomas looked at Lily's parents with an intensity that startled them. Your daughter has a remarkable gift, he said simply, one of the most natural musical talents I've encountered in my career. He turned to Lily. How would you like to play on a real piano again? Her eyes widened. But the community center piano is broken, and Mrs. Wilson doesn't want me there anymore. There are other pianos, Thomas smiled, and I think it's time more people heard what you can do. The next morning, Lily woke to the sound of her parents talking in hushed, excited tones in the kitchen. She caught fragments of their conversation, words like opportunity and future, before they noticed her standing in the doorway. Good. Morning, sleepyhead, her mother said, smiling more brightly than Lily had seen in days. There's someone coming to see you today. Mr. Reed called this morning, her father explained, pouring Lily a glass of orange juice. He's bringing a friend who wants to hear you play. Lily's stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. Who? A professor from the Riverside Music Academy, her mother said, her eyes shining. Mr. Reed sent her your recording, and she wants to meet you. Lily nearly spilled her juice. The Riverside Music Academy was the most prestigious music school in the state. She'd seen their students perform once when her school took a field trip to the city concert hall. Those students had played, like professionals, their fingers flying over the keys with confidence and skill Lily could only dream of. "But I'm not good enough for a place like that," she whispered. Her father knelt beside her chair. "Mr. Reed thinks you are, and he knows music." Lily spent the morning alternating between practicing on her keyboard and changing her clothes 3 times. She finally settled on her nicest blue dress with the white collar, the one she wore for Chinese New Year celebrations and school pictures. Just after lunch, there was a knock at the door. Thomas Reed stood there with a tall, elegant woman whose silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a leather portfolio and had kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Lily, this is Dr. Helen Crawford from the Riverside Music Academy." Thomas introduced them. "Dr. Crawford, this is Lily Chen." The woman smiled warmly and extended her hand. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Lily. Thomas has told me you have a special gift for music." Lily shook the offered hand shyly. "Thank you for coming, ma'am." They settled in the small living room, Dr. Crawford accepting a cup of tea from Lily's mother. After some polite conversation about the town and the family's grocery store, she opened her portfolio. "I listened to the recording Thomas sent me last night," she said. "I found it quite extraordinary, especially when he told me you're self-taught." Lily glanced at her keyboard in the corner. "I just play what I hear in my head." "That's exactly what makes it special," Dr. Crawford said. "Many students can learn technique, but they play what's on the page. You play what's in your heart." She turned to Lily's parents. "With your permission, I'd like to hear Lily play in person." Lily's mother nodded encouragingly, and Lily took her place at the keyboard. Her hands were trembling slightly as she positioned them over the keys. "Play whatever makes you happy," Dr. Crawford suggested gently. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts, then began to play. She started with a classical piece, Mozart's Rondo alla Turca, which she'd learned by watching a tutorial video dozens of times. Her small fingers danced over the keys with unexpected precision, the joyful melody filling their modest apartment. When she finished, Dr. Crawford was leaning forward in her seat, eyes bright with interest. "Wonderful. Now, would you play something of your own creation?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. She rarely shared her own compositions with anyone. They felt too personal, too revealing. But something about Dr. Crawford's genuine interest gave her courage. She began playing the piece Thomas had recorded, but this time she expanded on it, adding sections she'd been developing in her head since yesterday. The music told the story of her family's journey from China to America, of the challenges they'd faced and the dreams they still cherished. It wove together elements of classical structure with melodic phrases that echoed Chinese folk songs her grandmother had sung to her as a baby. There were moments of struggle represented by minor keys and dissonant chords that resolved into hopeful, major passages. When the final notes faded, the room was silent. Lily looked up to see her mother wiping tears from her eyes. Her father stood by the window, his back turned but his shoulders visibly moved by emotion. Dr. Crawford was completely still, her teacup forgotten in her hands. "Lily," she finally said, her voice soft with amazement. "How long have you been composing your own music?" Lily shrugged. "Always, I guess. I hear music in my head all the time. When I'm falling asleep, when I'm at school, even when I'm helping at the store." Dr. Crawford exchanged a glance with Thomas. "And you've never had formal training in composition?" "No, ma'am. Just piano. Tutorials online." Dr. Crawford placed her teacup down carefully and turned to Lily's parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, your daughter has an exceptional natural talent, what we call a true prodigy. With proper training, she could develop into a remarkable pianist and composer." Lily's father joined them, sitting beside his wife on the couch. "We have always known Lily loves music, but we cannot afford fancy lessons or expensive schools. That's why I'm here," Dr. Crawford said. "The Riverside Academy has a scholarship program for exceptionally gifted children. It covers all tuition, plus a weekly private lesson with one of our master teachers." She turned back to Lily. "We would need to conduct a formal audition, But based on what I've heard today, I believe Lily would be an excellent candidate. The hope that flashed across Lily's face was impossible to miss. A real teacher? And a real piano to practice on? Yes, Dr. Crawford smiled. Our facilities include practice rooms with grand pianos that students can use every day. Lily's parents exchanged concerned looks. The academy is nearly an hour's drive from here, her mother said. We work long hours at the store. We have a solution for that too, Thomas interjected. I've spoken with Mrs. Rivera, who teaches 4th grade at Pine Creek Elementary. Her daughter attends Riverside for violin, and she drives there 3 times a week for afternoon lessons. She'd be happy to take Lily along. Lily could hardly believe what she was hearing. A chance to study at a real music academy, to play on real pianos every day, to learn from actual teachers instead of YouTube videos. It seemed too wonderful to be true. There's one more thing, Thomas added, looking directly at Lily. I've arranged for a piano to be delivered here tomorrow. Here? Lily's father looked around their small apartment in confusion. But we have no space, and certainly no money, for such a thing. Thomas smiled. It's not new. It's a used upright that came from a church that recently upgraded to a digital organ. It needs some work, but the sound is still quite good, and it won't cost you anything. We couldn't possibly accept, Lily's mother began. It's not charity, Thomas assured them. I have a proposal. I'll provide the piano and maintain it, and in exchange, Lily will give basic piano lessons to younger children in the community. There are plenty of families who can't afford the academy, but would love their children to learn music. Dr. Crawford nodded approvingly. Teaching is an excellent way to develop one's own skills too. Some of our best students are also our youngest teachers. Lily could hardly contain her excitement. I could teach other kids? Really? If your parents agree, Thomas said. Her parents looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that Lily could never quite decode. Finally, her father nodded. We came to America so our children could have opportunities we never had, he said quietly. We would be poor parents indeed if we stood in the way of such a blessing. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur for Lily. Dr. Crawford explained the scholarship process, scheduled a formal audition for the following week, and left several music books for Lily to explore. Thomas measured the living room wall where the upright piano would fit best, promising to return with it the next day. After their visitors left, Lily sat at her little keyboard, running her fingers over the plastic keys that had been her only musical outlet for so long. Soon she would have a real piano, not just to play at the community center twice a week, but here in her own home, available whenever inspiration struck. That evening, as she helped her mother prepare dinner, Lily asked the question that had been bothering her since the visitors left. Mom, what about the broken piano at the community center? We still can't afford to fix it. Her mother stirred the pot of soup slowly. Mr. Reed spoke with your father about that too. He says the repair costs will be covered by the center's insurance, since the damage was caused by poor maintenance, not by you. And he's offered to do the repairs at a reduced rate. Relief washed over Lily. So nobody thinks I broke it on purpose anymore? Mr. Parker is telling everyone the truth, her mother assured her, and soon they will have other things to say about Lily Chen besides the girl who broke the piano. Lily smiled, imagining a future where people might know her for her music instead. It seemed impossible just days ago, but now, like a distant melody growing clearer, she could almost hear it coming true. 1 week later, the community center's main hall was packed with people. Word had spread quickly through Pine Creek that something special was happening. Something involving the Henderson piano, the Chinese grocery store family, and Thomas Reed, the traveling piano technician who had somehow become the talk of the town. The old piano stood center stage, its dark wood gleaming under fresh polish. The broken hinge had been replaced, the soundboard repaired, and every key tuned to perfection. Thomas had worked on it daily, sometimes late into the night, to prepare it for this evening. In the front row sat Lily's family, her parents in their Sunday best, her little brother fidgeting in a clip-on tie. Behind them were Mrs. Rivera and her daughter, who had already taken Lily under their wing for the drive to Riverside Academy. Dr. Crawford had come from the city, bringing with her a colleague from the symphony orchestra who was curious about the young prodigy Thomas had discovered. Near the back of the room, half hidden behind taller attendees, sat Mrs. Wilson. Her face was unreadable, but she had come, which surprised everyone who knew how stubbornly she had blamed Lily for the piano's damage. Mr. Parker stepped onto the small stage, tapping the microphone nervously. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you all for coming. Before we begin tonight's special performance, I have an important announcement to make." The room quieted as he cleared his throat. As many of you know, there was an unfortunate incident involving our Henderson piano last week. Initial reports suggested that the damage was caused by careless playing. Those reports, he paused, looking directly at Mrs. Wilson, were incorrect. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mr. Reed, our visiting piano technician, has confirmed that the piano's lid hinge had been corroded for years. Its failure was inevitable and not the fault of young Lily Chen, who was playing at the time. Lily's father squeezed her hand gently. She had been so nervous about coming tonight, afraid of facing the same whispers and accusing glances that had followed her all week. "The Community Center Board wishes to extend a public apology to the Chen family," Mr. Parker continued. "We are grateful that Mr. Reed was able to repair the piano, with costs covered by our insurance, as this was clearly a maintenance issue, not user error." He gestured toward Thomas, who nodded from his seat near the piano. "And now," Mr. Parker's voice brightened, "we have a very special performance. Many of you know Lily Chen as the quiet girl from the grocery store, but tonight, you'll know her as something else entirely. Please welcome to the stage, Lily Chen." The applause was polite but reserved as Lily walked to the piano. She wore a simple blue dress with a white sash. Her mother had stayed up late altering it for the occasion. Her hair was pulled back with a matching ribbon, making her look even younger than her 10 years. As she settled on the bench, adjusting its height with the serious concentration of a much older musician, Thomas caught her eye from the side of the stage and gave her an encouraging nod. Lily took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. She started with a piece the town would recognize, Bach's Minuet in G, which was often performed at the community center's annual recitals. But even this simple piece sounded different under Lily's touch. The familiar melody took on new life, each phrase shaped with subtle nuance that made several audience members sit up straighter, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine surprise. When she finished the Bach, there was a moment of silence before the applause, stronger this time with a few exclamations of "bravo" from those who understood what they had just witnessed. Lily smiled shyly, then turned back to the piano. Now came the challenging part. She had practiced for hours on her new upright piano at home, preparing for this moment. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. This was the piece she had been playing when the piano lid fell, a piece far beyond what most would expect a 10-year-old to attempt. The haunting melody floated above delicate arpeggios, Lily's small hands stretching to reach chords that should have been impossible for her. In the audience, Dr. Crawford leaned toward her colleague from the symphony, whispering something that made him nod in amazement. Mrs. Wilson sat perfectly still, her lips slightly parted in astonishment. Lily's parents held hands tightly, their eyes glistening with pride. As the final notes of the Chopin faded, the hall erupted in enthusiastic applause. Several people rose to their feet, including Dr. Crawford and her colleague. Thomas beamed from the side of the stage, looking as proud as if Lily were his own daughter. Lily stood and bowed as she had seen pianists do in videos. But instead of leaving the stage, she returned to the piano. "For my last piece," she said softly into the microphone, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I'd like to play something I wrote myself. It's called Journey Home, and it's for my family and for Pine Creek." A hush fell over the audience. Original compositions weren't common at community center performances, especially not from children. The piece began with a simple, wistful melody that evoked distant mountains and misty rivers, echoes of the China her parents had left behind. Gradually, new themes emerged, hopeful, questioning, sometimes struggling, as the music told the story of their journey to America, to this small town that hadn't always welcomed them. In the final section, the earlier themes returned, now interwoven, with hints of American folk music and classical elements, creating something entirely new. Not fully Eastern or Western, but a beautiful bridge between worlds. The piece ended not with a dramatic flourish, but with a gentle resolution, like a sigh of contentment at finding one's place in the world. When Lily played the final chord, there wasn't a sound in the hall. For several heartbeats, the audience seemed to hold its collective breath, still caught in the spell of what they had just experienced. Then, as if a dam had broken, the applause began, thunderous, wholehearted, and accompanied by cheers and a standing ovation that included every person in the room. Even Mrs. Wilson was on her feet, clapping with uncharacteristic enthusiasm, her earlier doubts apparently forgotten. Lily bowed again, her face flushed with joy and relief. As she turned to leave the stage, she saw Thomas motioning for her to stay. He stepped forward carrying a large envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone as the applause gradually subsided, "what you've witnessed tonight is extraordinary. I've been working with pianists for over 30 years, and talent like Lily's appears perhaps once in a generation." He turned to Lily, handing her the envelope. "Dr. Crawford of the Riverside Music Academy has asked me to present this to you, Lily. It's official confirmation of your full scholarship beginning next month." The audience broke into applause again. Lily's mother covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "But there's more," Thomas continued. "Dr. Crawford's colleague, Mr. Howard Chen, no relation to our Lily, is the associate conductor of the State Symphony Orchestra. He has invited Lily to perform as a special guest at their Young Artist Showcase next month." Gasps of surprise and delight rippled through the crowd. The State Symphony was nationally renowned, their Young Artist Showcase broadcast on public television across the region. Mr. Parker stepped forward again, beaming. "I think it's fair to say that Pine Creek has discovered a true treasure in our midst. Lily, would you like to say a few words?" Lily approached the microphone, looking suddenly very small under the bright lights. She glanced at her parents, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said softly. "A week ago I thought I might never get to play a real piano again. Now I have one at home, and I get to study at Riverside Academy, and even play with the symphony." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My grandmother in China used to tell me that music is the bridge between hearts. I hope my music can be a bridge for all of us." The simplicity and sincerity of her words touched the audience deeply. As Lily left the stage to rejoin her family, people rose from their seats to congratulate them. Community members who had barely spoken to the Chens in 3 years now approached warmly, introducing themselves and offering rides to Riverside Academy, meals for busy practice days, even babysitting for Lily's brother when her parents needed to attend her performances. Mrs. Wilson waited until the crowd around the family had thinned before approaching. She stood before Lily, her usual stern expression softened by something that might have been regret. "You play beautifully," she said, quietly. "I was wrong about you and I'm sorry." Lily nodded, accepting the apology with grace beyond her years. "Would you consider playing for my advanced students sometime?" Mrs. Wilson added. "They could learn a great deal from your interpretation of Chopin." "I'd like that," Lily replied, with a smile. As the evening wound down, Lily found herself standing beside the Henderson piano, running her fingers lightly over its keys. Thomas joined her, leaning against the instrument that had nearly ended her musical journey before it truly began. "How does it feel?" he asked. Lily considered the question carefully. "Like waking up from a bad dream into something better than I could have imagined," Thomas smiled. "That's just the beginning, Lily Chen. Just the beginning." 1 year had passed since the night of Lily's performance at the Pine Creek Community Center. The calendar on the Chen family's kitchen wall now overflowed with colorful marks. Lesson times, practice sessions, performance dates, and travel plans. A visual diary of how dramatically their lives had changed. The grocery store still stood, on Maple Street, but it now boasted a new sign: Chen's Market and Music Supplies. A small section near the front offered piano books, sheet music, and basic accessories like metronomes and keyboard cleaners. Lily's father had noticed how many parents were asking where to find music materials after their children started lessons with Lily, and he'd spotted a business opportunity that combined their old life with the new. On this particular Saturday morning, Lily sat at her upright piano, no longer Thomas's loaner but her very own instrument, purchased with money from her first paid performances and scholarship stipend. Her fingers moved confidently through warm-up exercises as sunlight streamed through the apartment windows. On the wall above the piano hung framed programs from her concerts over the past year, alongside a newspaper article with the headline, "Local Prodigy Wows at State Symphony." The doorbell rang, interrupting her practice. Lily's mother answered, it greeting Mrs. Rivera, who had come to drive Lily to her weekly lesson at Riverside Academy. Over the months, these car rides had grown into something precious. 45 minutes of conversation about music, school, and life with someone who had become not just a driver but a mentor. "Ready for the big day tomorrow?" Mrs. Rivera asked, as they drove through town. Lily nodded, though butterflies fluttered in her stomach at the thought. Tomorrow would be her largest performance yet, a solo recital at the Westfield Concert Hall in the city, where she would play for nearly 500 people. "Dr. Crawford says I'm prepared," she replied, watching familiar Pine Creek buildings give way to open countryside. "But it's a lot of music to remember." "You'll be wonderful," Mrs. Rivera assured her, "just like you were at the Young Artists Showcase." The memory of that first major performance still felt dreamlike to Lily. She had played her original composition with the State Symphony Orchestra, receiving a standing ovation that brought her to tears. The performance had been broadcast on public television, introducing Lily Chen to audiences far beyond Pine Creek. What followed was a whirlwind year of change and growth. At Riverside Academy, Lily thrived under proper instruction, her natural talent blossoming with technical training she had previously lacked. Dr. Crawford had become her primary teacher, pushing Lily to expand her abilities while nurturing her unique interpretative voice. Meanwhile, true to her promise, Lily had begun teaching piano to younger children in Pine Creek. What started as lessons for 3 students in her family's apartment grew into 15 students, necessitating the use of the community center on weekend mornings. The very piano that had once been the source of her greatest humiliation now served as the instrument on which she launched other children's musical journeys. Even Mrs. Wilson had come around, eventually asking Lily to help with her more advanced students. Their relationship had evolved into a respectful collaboration, with the older teacher focusing on technical fundamentals, while Lily helped with expression and musicality. At Riverside Academy, Lily's lesson that day focused on the most challenging piece in tomorrow's program, Beethoven's Sonata No. 14, the Moonlight Sonata. The famous first movement came naturally to her, its haunting melody speaking directly to her soul. But the third movement, with its furious speed and technical demands, still presented challenges. "Remember to breathe," Dr. Crawford reminded her as Lily's fingers flew across the keys, stumbling slightly on a particularly difficult passage. "Your body can't do what your mind can't picture. See the music flowing through you." Lily nodded, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time her hands remained steady through the troublesome section, drawing a smile of approval from her teacher. "Much better. Now let's talk about tomorrow." After the lesson, Mrs. Rivera drove Lily to the city for a rehearsal at Westfield Concert Hall. Walking onto that stage for the first time, Lily faltered momentarily. The hall seemed enormous, the rows of empty seats stretching back further than she could clearly see. The grand piano waiting center stage was larger and more imposing than any she had played before. Thomas Reed was there, having arranged his travel schedule to help prepare the piano for her recital. He gave her an encouraging wink as she approached the instrument. "It looks scary now," he said quietly. "But tomorrow, when you're playing, this hall will feel like the most natural place in the world." Lily ran her fingers across the smooth keys, testing their weight and response. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Steinway Concert Grand, Thomas replied. The same model used by the greatest pianists in the world. And tomorrow it's all yours. The rehearsal went well, though the acoustics of the hall took some adjustment. Lily's notes resonated differently here than in the practice rooms at Riverside or her family's apartment. Each sound seemed to linger in the air longer, requiring more precise control of dynamics and timing. That evening, back in Pine Creek, Lily found a surprise waiting at home, a package from China. Her grandmother, who had never seen her play, but had received videos of every performance, had sent a gift for the recital. Inside was a delicate jade pin shaped like a music note, with a card that read in careful English, "Music crosses oceans. So proud of my little butterfly." Lily's mother helped pin it to the dress she would wear tomorrow, a new dress in deep purple silk, far more elegant than anything she had owned before her musical journey began. "Your grandmother saved for months to send this," her mother said, softly. "When we left China, she told me her greatest sadness was that she might never see what you would become." "Maybe someday she can visit," Lily suggested, "or we could visit her." Her mother smiled. "Perhaps. Your music is opening doors we never imagined." She brushed Lily's hair back from her face. "Now sleep. Tomorrow is your big day." But sleep came fitfully that night, as Lily's mind replayed passages of music, worrying over transitions and tempos, imagining both triumph and disaster on that imposing stage. Morning arrived with gentle rain that cleared to sunshine by noon, a good omen, according to Lily's father. The family drove to the concert hall together in their newly purchased used car, another change music had brought to their lives. Thomas met them at the artist's entrance, escorting them through corridors usually closed to the public. Backstage was a flurry of activity. Dr. Crawford was there, along with several faculty members from Riverside Academy. A photographer from the local newspaper snapped pictures as Lily warmed up on a practice piano in the green room. A reporter asked questions about her journey from self-taught pianist to recitalist at Westfield Hall in just over a year. Through it all, Lily remained surprisingly calm, anchored by her grandmother's jade pin and the presence of those who had supported her from the beginning. Her parents, Thomas, Dr. Crawford, and even Mrs. Wilson, who had closed her studio for the day, to attend. As the hall filled with audience members, Lily peeked through the curtains. She spotted familiar faces from Pine Creek mixed with strangers drawn by reviews of her previous performances. In the third row sat the entire board of the community center, including Mr. Parker, who waved when he caught her eye. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. Lily's mother straightened her dress one last time, touching the jade pin for good luck. Her father squeezed her shoulder gently. "Remember," he said in Mandarin, "the notes are just the beginning. The music is in your heart." Then it was time. Lily walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her as applause filled the hall. She bowed as she had practiced, then settled at the magnificent Steinway. For a breathless moment, she placed her hands on the keys without pressing them, feeling the potential for music beneath her fingers. She began with Bach, clear, structured, precise, before moving to Chopin, whose emotional depth had first revealed her exceptional musicality. The audience listened in rapt silence as this small girl in purple silk drew sounds from the piano that spoke directly to their hearts. After intermission came her original compositions, including an expanded version of Journey Home and a new piece called Pine Creek Mornings that captured the quiet beauty of her adopted hometown. She finished with the Beethoven, conquering the challenging third movement with a confidence that drew gasps from those who understood its difficulty. As the final notes faded, there was that magical moment of silence that comes when an audience is truly moved, followed by thunderous applause that grew as people rose to their feet. Lily bowed deeply, emotion overwhelming her as she spotted her parents standing proudly, her mother wiping away tears. For her encore, Lily returned to the piano and played a simple Chinese folk song her grandmother had taught her, Jasmine Flower. Its delicate melody, played with heartfelt simplicity after the technical fireworks of Beethoven, brought a different kind of tears to many eyes. Backstage after the recital, surrounded by flowers and well-wishers, Lily found a moment alone with Thomas. 1 year ago, she said quietly, I thought my life was over because a piano lid fell. Thomas smiled. And now? Lily touched her grandmother's jade pin. Now I know it was just beginning. Music has given me a voice I never knew I had. No, Thomas corrected gently. The music was always in you. What you found was a world ready to listen. As they rejoined the celebration, a reporter approached with news that would add another mark to the Chen family calendar, an invitation for Lily to perform in Chicago, the first step on a journey that would eventually take her music and her story around the world.